We argue that near is better than far, small than big, simple than complex. And in the footnotes, we argue too, and we argue there at 5 Point Type, Helvetica, sans serif, because even there is a squabble with national economy and the good people in Washington and Nashville who want to do it all for us and who are robbing us blind in secret without our realizing it. And we argue as against them that personal is better than corporate and that physical is better than abstract. These are, in many ways, fruits of Christianity, and so we have them in common with all kinds of people who don't know anything about God or really care anything about God, but they are still here in local economy and the free market trying to be freer than they are, hoping to have more local than we've had in the past in the Chattanooga area. And we are wanting people to go into business. I think I have arguments with my partner here at the radio station. Do people really want to be in business? Is there really an entrepreneurial spirit among Americans? And he has, Confederate Mike, he has the bleakest view about Americans. And I'm a bit more optimistic and a bit more cheerful, as is Susan Salerno. She runs River Gorge Enterprises that she began in 1993, a business consulting service that has done many things over the years and has taken many flavors as her clientele has come and gone and improved, and she's improved what she knows. And I met her recently at a dentist's office, and I said, Susan, you need to come on the program and talk with my listener about what you do and what he can learn from you as an advisor to people who are, some of them maybe just starting up, right? They've just started their enterprises, or they're just thinking about it. Say something about what you do at River Gorge Enterprises, Susan Salerno.
Well, I provide a broad variety of services, from creating business plans for startup companies so they can kind of hone in what they really are doing and maybe even secure funding, to setting up, organizing business systems, whether they be accounting systems or administrative systems. And what I really love is going in and evaluating an existing business and showing them what they're doing is good and working, and where they can improve, which is, or maybe they can change direction. For example, a client of mine who's a dentist, the population in Chattanooga hasn't really statistically changed significantly in the last 40 years, but we've gone from having 200 dentists to having over 830 entries on the internet for dental services. Well, if you chart that out of what your market share is, you've got a skinny little teeny tiny line. And if you're advertising restorative or hygiene, people have no way to evaluate that other than to look at price. So that's why we all get these flyers.
Or reviews, perhaps.
Right, or reviews. But don't get me started. That's a whole different thing of how people manipulate those reviews. But anyway, so that's why we get those flyers in our mailboxes that advertise, these low cost products. So I looked at them and I said, if you're trying to compete with 800 people to get that one crown, you may as well close up shop. But you provide other services that you are not marketing, that no one else in the greater Chattanooga area provides. And that's where we need to focus your marketing efforts, and built them a website, started to do patient education, and their business grew by 35% last year.
And what is the special service in that case?
In that case, they provide dental sleep medicine services, and they also provide TMJ services for people who have joint issues related to their teeth. So, that's a case where they're doing the same thing, but we're shifting the focus. And every time they say, well, we need to, be out there advertising hygiene, I just cringe and I say, and wasting money. Do you know that those postcard campaigns cost $36,000 a year? When they told me they wanted to do a postcard campaign, I looked at them and I said, you need a new car. Let's get you a new car and shrink wrap that car before we just throw. How many people really look at those postcards? And yet our mailbox is filled with them all the time. I'd really love to hear from somebody who's got an idea out there. 800-8949. Please call me. I want to talk to you. I'm so excited to hear about your idea and what can help you get excited about getting up in the morning and going about your day.
Does my listener, Susan Salerno, have to have an MBA to start a business?
Oh, God.
Does he have to read business books?
You know, I think you thought I was crazy when you told me to bring a business book and hold it up so everybody can see. And I said, oh, no, that's the last thing they want to do. If you want to go into corporate America where they're looking at thousands of resumes, they want to see that MBA. But I'm talking to that small person, that plain old people who might want to do something that starts up in their garage or their kitchen. Or, you know, they don't have to do big.
Be specific, Susan. What kind of job, what kind of enterprise are we talking about? What kind of small things, Etsy sites, helping my listener helping his wife or his daughter start a business? What kind of things are small enough that can be started just at home at part-time?
There are multi-million clothing companies that started in a garage. I mean, you know, there's not a typical. It's just if you have an idea, grow it in your garage. There's all kinds of tax advantages to having a business in your home that you should be capitalizing so that you're holding on to as much as your money to reinvest in your business and grow in your business. Of course, the classic example is Apple Computer that was started in his garage. So, you know, don't think that there is a particular idea. I say don't assume. And, you know, I encourage everybody to go out there. If you have an idea for a business, go call up somebody who's doing that business and talk to them. But don't assume that they really know what they're doing. There's a lot of times I go into a business, they have a great idea, but they're so disorganized. They're so inefficient. They can't make any money. So take what nuggets of wisdom you can and then throw the rest away and do it your way.
And maybe the listener could help this other person in the associated or the nearby field to his own.
Not necessarily. People are very competitive when it comes to business. And I don't know about you, but nobody wants to have some upstart tell them that they're not doing it the right way. So, you know, and even when I have clients who come to me and say, I want your help, I would say about 50% of them don't, you know, listen and don't take it. And a year later, when I talk to them, they're still doing the same thing that's keeping them in trouble. So, you know, again, that's where it goes back to living in the question. The other thing I want to caution people, and I hear this a lot, somebody has an idea. It's a great idea. I'm excited. They're excited. We've put it into place. And they're already thinking about those sales they see coming down the pike that haven't manifested yet. And I tell them to take a deep breath. It always takes longer than you think. It just, you know, that rule for a startup business of 3 to 5 years before you're making a profit is just a very good rule. Susan
Salerno, what does that mean 4 or 5 years before you're earning a profit? What does that mean exactly? Is the listener having to put money, his own private money, into the business to keep it afloat? Is he having to borrow for that? How does he endure that long before he sees a profit? What does that mean?
Well, it doesn't necessarily mean a profit, but it means that you have a business that has generated enough mass that it starts to create its own business. You know, that 3 to 5 year mark is where you are all your energy, all your focus is with pushing it forward. And then it achieves what I call a big enough mass that it can start to generate business on its own. Where all of a sudden people are hearing about you from somebody, and so then they're coming to you, which is what happened to my lady with the with the health bars. For the beginning, she was just selling them to other marathon runners, and they would like them and tell somebody. That's how I found out about her, is I bought a box of her bars.
In doing research in the proposed field of business, my listener he has to, of course, know who the competitors are, where the gaps are in that particular market, and how he can stand out. So is part of your efforts as consultant Susan Salerno at River Gorge Enterprises is to help him see how to be distinct in the market? How important is the listener being distinct and standing apart in his area of service or product?
It's two things. It's number one, how are you going to identify yourself from the field? What is different and unique about you that I should buy your product or use your service that's different from everybody else? So that's the first thing. And the other thing is knowing where your market share is. If you have an existing business and you see your numbers dropping off, it may be because your market share is an older population and they're literally dying. So then you have to kind of rethink about, well, now what do? I can't continue to be in business if everybody who comes to see me is 60 years or older. I have to somehow reevaluate what I'm doing so I capture that younger market. Or, a younger market might not have the resources. And if all your business is coming from a younger market and they love your product and they rave about it, for example, let's say a t-shirt, they might buy one t-shirt. You want to hit that older market that has more capital resources, and they might buy 5 t-shirts. You see this in the music industry where, all these old bands, are doing tours because they're from our childhood memories of when we used to go to the concert and have a good time, and we have the money to spend on those tickets. Those younger kids, they may not have it. So that's why you see all these older band tours.
One of the Nooga radio salesmen recently told me about a visit he'd had 2 or 3 times to a restaurant owner, and he just couldn't get this owner to say why our listeners should come into his shop. And that's always the question for the advertising part of business, where you're reaching out for new customers. And we said, or the salesman said, look, you have to care enough about what you're doing to stand apart. And then our job in the advertising field is to explain to the listener or show the listener or compel the listener to do any of 3 things: to go to the website, make a phone call, or to drive up and walk into your business. That's our job, is to get them to come that far. But why should he do that? And this man apparently couldn't tell the salesman how that was. And so talk a little bit about the idea of being distinct and standing apart. Elaborate on that. Maybe you could give an example from among your clientele at River Gorge Enterprises.
Well, that's one of the, right there's a classic example of, I bet that restaurant owner had worked in a restaurant and had, come up with his dream of having a restaurant. And he probably carried over what he knew to that new business. And so you're right, he probably wasn't distinct and probably didn't even know why he was distinct, because what he was offering was what you could get someplace else. So what I might say to that person is, look around your neighborhood. Look at the type of restaurants that are around in your neighborhood. What kinds of food are they offering? How can you tailor your menu to be different in offering? I was really successful in the natural foods industry in the late 70s and early 80s, because no one else was doing businesses like that. You couldn't find a natural foods restaurant. You couldn't find a whole grain bakery. You couldn't even find a loaf of whole grain bread in the grocery store. So, if I had just gone out and been a bakery, I wouldn't have been successful. But I was a whole grain bakery, and and then expanded into even offering some grocery items. So, knowing where your niche is, knowing where that energy is coming back. If I'd sold white bread, they could go to the grocery store and get white bread cheaper. But my customers were coming to me because I had fresh, morning-made whole grain bread.
One of the arguments, Susan and Salerno, for local economy, or one of the means by which we can have a stronger local economy, is divest nationally and invest locally. My listener may have tens of thousands, he may have hundreds of thousands of dollars socked away in annuities, retirement funds, treasuries, stocks. And one reason I want to encourage him in the direction of local economy is that we need capital in Chattanooga. We need investors who will take maybe one of your clients and say, well, Susan, you've got a client who needs $100,000 for adding a second office or a second branch of that business, maybe one in Brainerd and the other one could be in Ooltewah, let's say. And so there's some capital needed, and I've got money available, and I'm a patient investor. I want to invest local. I have a local-centric perspective, thanks to David Tulis and people like him who are talking in terms of local economy. And I have investment capital that I've divested from Wall Street. Where is my listener supposed to get capital? Is he supposed to go to the bank? What are the prospects of local capitalization in the Chattanooga area, Susan?
Well, this is really a problem. And what you're really talking about is called seed funding. You know, if you have a one established business, you can go to a bank and they'll give you a loan for opening that second or that third or whatever, because you have that 3 to 5 year revenue history. I wish there was some, if there's anybody out there who was interested, I would love to see some kind of organization that really provided seed funding along what you see in underdeveloped countries, where they'll give these low-cost loans or even grants, to people to test that waters and see if they can make something grow. But it's really a huge need. And the other part that I think needs to go along with the seed funding is you have to have people who are willing to walk with that person who may not have any business experience. For example, I had a client. I did a business plan. She was able to get some funding to start her business. Lovely lady. I adore her, but she'd never had anything before. And she spent
what?
She came from
personal possessions? Or?
Yeah, she came from a very limited, background in terms of economics. And she went out and she bought clothes and she bought items for her office. And I looked at her and I said, "But these don't grow your business." She felt uncomfortable with her clothing and approaching the people that she needed. And I wanted, I hated that she did that, because if she had asked me ahead of time, I would have said, don't worry about that. People are going to be looking at how hard you're working. They're not going to be looking at the clothing that you're wearing.
Should my listener invest in himself, Susan? If my listener has, let's say, $95,000 saved up in 401k and so on, should he consider liquefying some of that and investing in his own business, or maybe his wife's business, or an elder son's or daughter's startup?
Absolutely. And the reason I say that is that once you learn how to do a business, you can always do business. My children had very non-traditional high school years, and that, they tested out of school, and we ran a family business. And now, even though that family business isn't going anymore, they're both doing other businesses. And my son, had that business with me. So
now that's the son, Michael, and
right.
It was a bed and breakfast that you
right.
and he ran, and you sold it last week.
Yesterday.
This week, okay. We sold it this week, okay. So and so you have a business-oriented son. We'll say something more about him, and then mention, if you would, your daughter, who is involved in the record business, right?
Well, no, she left that, and she's got a different business on her own. And that's where I want to say, even if the business that you start isn't successful, you've learned a lot, and you can take that to the next business. Now, should that person who's got $95,000 take that all out and put it all in? Absolutely not. You need to test the waters. You need to take that little footprint. Remember what I said, it always takes longer for a business to gain momentum and sustain itself than you think. You can't, just because we have this idea, we have to remember it's going to take 3 to 5 years before that idea is going to, really take hold. And you may be able to, make a little bit of money, but you're going to still have to be putting a lot of effort into it.
Some people have said that the internet, Susan Salerno, makes everything worthless. Is it possible to have a business online that makes money and generates income, revenue?
Oh, there's lots of retail businesses that make money, but we all can't be Amazon. And I think even Amazon is making a mistake by trying to be everything. I think at some point, Newton's law or Alfred Einstein's law is going to come back where you can only expand so far and then it's going to collapse. So, don't try to be everything. I see this all the time where a company gets big and then they start getting grandiose. And maybe that's what you want to do. Maybe you want to be the next Amazon. But that when you get to that level, I don't think you're really benefiting the locals anymore.
Well, the question, to get back to the question, Susan, an online only business that doesn't really have a local presence, doesn't have a storefront, do you have customers who are coming to you for your counsel that are only online and ship?
Yes.
Or provide services through the internet?
Yeah, that's that RV and boat company that I was telling you about. They just have a warehouse and they ship everything out. They had a retail business and it was sucking money. It was, and why? By the time you pay for the lights and you pay for the shelving and you pay for the building and you pay for the employees to be there and man the building, if that's not making money, then you need to shut that baby down. And
so that went from a retail business to an online only.
They had platform. Online and they had retail because they thought they needed that. And like I said, they needed to think about what they were doing that was what was working.
Which is better for Chattanooga, Susan Salerno, that a German company buys land at Enterprise South, builds a factory, hires 100 people, A, or B, that my listener and 99 other people start their own little businesses in their garages or spare bedrooms?
Well, for that factory worker who, and I know at Amazon, there's people from Jasper that are driving to work those warehouse jobs and paying for their families, that they would say that it was choice A. My opinion, because you're limited as to where you're going to go in that kind of situation and how meaningful it's going to be to you is choice B.
Better that you, the listener, and 99 people like you start your own little enterprises, and you can still have your job, right? Still maintain your job for now.
You don't have to. It doesn't have to be an either or. You keep the family stability, and yet you start that little enterprise, hopefully with your family.
How can my listener get a hold of you, Susan?
You can call me at area code 818-653-9620, 818-653-9620.
This is David Tulis, and you're here at Chattanooga Radio, 1240 AM and 92.7 FM. Susan, thanks for joining us.
Oh, it's been my pleasure.
Susan Salerno runs River Gorge Enterprises. Call her if you want to have some great consulting services. David Tulis, and we are glad to have you stay tuned in to Legal Bites, which is next. Legal advice, legal insight from top-notch attorney here in Chattanooga.
The Tennessee Valley's news, talk, and sports leader, Nooga Radio.